And as far as the coverage at the station, when you do get called or you pulled away from, do we lose staff at the?
We backfill, like any other time when people get called out. We have other people that are involved in other teams, hazmat, the incident support unit.
Just like a mutual aid call.
That's correct.
Just like a mutual aid call.
That's correct.
And Linfield's part of this consortium?
Everybody in Essex County.
Oh, I'm just wondering why they didn't hold the vehicle.
But they don't have a team.
They don't have a team.
There are
Oh,
three
I see.
teams. There's one in Hamilton, there's one in North Reading, and where's the third team?
A lot of ones in Peabody.
In Peabody. So those are the teams that get the vehicles, because they're the ones that house it. Are there any members from Linfield on the team?
No. Yeah.
First of all, I think it's a great program
Yeah.
that we're involved in, and certainly enhancing the response to anomalies, those types of situations that people at regular firefighters aren't necessarily trained in. It's good to become part of that consortium. And if we can participate by housing some vehicles, and again, we already have some trained personnel to assist. If we're gonna get into the program or stay in the program, I think something like this, it's a good idea.
Mr. Prisco.
So Chief, can you absorb the $2 grand? Or you
Think
here
so.
asking us for $2 grand?
No, I think we can probably make it work.
It's a no-brainer to me.
Any other comments?
Nope.
We need a motion to accept the, sure you
See
have
one.
one there.
No, because the vehicle is being donated to the
Technical rescue.
technical rescue
County
team.
Technical Rescue Team.
So we're just agreeing to house it and put some gas in it and
Put
insure
a
it.
plate on it and insure it.
That's it.
Once in a while, put gas in it, or diesel.
So the
Just
consensus
your
of the
bosses.
board, I guess, as I read it, is
It's to allow the administration to pursue it.
Accept the gift.
All set?
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Have
you.
a great night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night.
See you. Good night.
next item on our agenda is the acceptance of the capital improvement policy, and after reading through it, Greg, what I had requested doesn't appear to be here.
Could you just allude to that, Mr. Chairman, because we asked the Finance Committee to give us the most up-to-date version, and this is what we received, so.
I had suggested that the $25,000
Phased in.
phased in.
Right.
And stated in the policy as a phase-in, as a goal to try to
Something
achieve.
that was realistic that we could use and enforce through the financial planning team meeting for the FY 2013 budget. And I don't think the $25,000 limit
Is
does it.
realistic, right.
I'm a little slow, so the words that are in here now say, for an item to be considered a capital expenditure, it must have a minimum value of $25,000 in a useful life of 5 years or
Right.
more. And you don't like that wording.
No, I
He
like the
Yeah, he
word.
likes it.
I like it, but I wanted it to be enforceable, and it wouldn't be enforceable
Okay,
over the, so I had suggested over
We're
the
not
next
able to
5
adhere to
years.
it right now.
okay.
Over the next 5 years, we go from 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 and reach 25,000.
So that from a budgetary standpoint, our actions will match the goals established by this policy. Because right now, if you put it at 25,000, we won't be in compliance with it.
All right.
You know, so the chairman was asking at the last meeting when the finance committee representatives were here to, again, have the policy reflect the phasing in of it over
Right, that would make
3
sense.
to 5 year period, which they agreed to.
See, the issue is if we go back, we go to any one budget and say, okay, the item is $23,000, it's gotta be in your
It should be in your
operating
operating
budget.
budget.
Right.
That's what we'd like it to be, but to do it in 2013 isn't gonna happen.
Yeah.
So we end up not following the policy.
Yeah, it wasn't
That's why I
captured in
made-
your minutes. I was just looking to see if maybe it was captured in the minutes, but it wasn't. That doesn't matter.
No, but
maybe
Don
take
was
the
here,
words
Mr.
from it.
Kelleher was
aware
here.
of it. I mean, he thought
that was
he thought
pretty
it was
clear.
acceptable, he was gonna take it
Oh,
back
it makes
and
sense.
nothing happened.
All
So
right,
I
so-
would recommend that we just postpone,
Well, can't we just
Second.
give
Is there
them the
another
words?
section that you want to revise, Mr. Chairman? Because I've got that piece, and I'd be happy to revise it. Is there another piece in
no,
here?
there was nothing else.
So why can't we just
Wasn't
approve
there
with
an
that
issue
comment?
regarding the stabilization, the use of the stabilization fund?
We had some discussion about the debt stabilization fund, the stabilization fund. I think we had a little difference of opinion among some of us as to whether or not, what, the Finance Committee's opinion, I don't mean to speak for them, but was that the debt stabilization fund was something that was probably going to be phased out or phase itself out at some point in time. I didn't necessarily agree with that, but it wasn't reflected in here at all.
I didn't view the two as in conflict with one another, so.
What's that?
What do you
I
mean?
mean, I agree with this, I didn't disagree, I should say that I didn't see there was a conflict between the two.
Other than there was no mention of it.
No mention of it, right.
Other
That
than
was the
the-
issue.
Because it's not in here.
Right, other than there was no mention of it. In other words, they were not inclined to mention the debt stabilization fund because they didn't see it as having a long life, and therefore not being a part of a policy.
I would just ask the board members to look at page 9, and specifically bullet number 1, which addresses the use of the stabilization fund on an annual basis to offset debt service costs. I think that was one of the provisions that the board had a concern with. Excuse me.
Debt derived services excludes debt,
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Which one did he say?
One, on page 9.
Purpose, under purpose?
Right here.
Yeah,
No, I haven't.
Okay,
number 1, right?
that's correct.
Yeah. I guess that has to come out. I don't think, at least I've never looked at the stabilization fund as one where we were gonna use to balance the debt payment.
Although, in years past, we did that, but we've established as the debt stabilization fund in order to keep it out of this venue, because this is a 4/5 vote to get it out anyway. And what the debt stabilization fund does is allows us to shift some money, save some money, reserve some funds, and allows us just on a majority vote to maneuver the funds around.
Yeah, I think when we got,
Getting out of the stabilization fund is much more difficult. It's a 4/5 vote at town meeting.
I think this is how we got into the, talking about the debt
Discussion, yeah.
stabilization.
And as far as, the actual practical aspects of implementing things, and what have we been doing lately? And again, the Finance Committee felt as though the debt stabilization fund has somewhat of a finite life, based upon the stresses on the budget and the way that we've
Well,
been
I
using
tell you,
it.
I mean, quite honestly, I would take it out, take number 1 out, renumber 2 and 3, 1 and 2. And the reason why I say that is, that if we go forward and bond more than we can cover or use up the debt stabilization fund, then it comes out of our operating expenses on an annual basis.
Yeah, but again, what they were looking to do here was, if you had to dip into it, go ahead and dip into it, but then as funds became available, you were to reimburse it as a matter of policy
I-
first. In other words, it becomes a first-time obligation and payment as a matter of policy to reimburse the stabilization fund. Again, in theory, it's a wonderful thing.
We tried that with the debt stabilization fund, we haven't been able to make it work, and that's why I'd like to take it out of there.
Yeah.
It's up to the board.
I don't
Yeah, I think-
necessarily disagree, and that was,
Probably should come out, and I think we're better off just tabling this. We have a financial planning team meeting on Friday. I think we could probably work out.
that's probably an
the issue.
appropriate venue to
Yeah.
try and work out the differences of opinion
Right.
here.
Yeah.
And again, I thought we were gonna have something from the FinCom that would reflect.
Yeah, I thought
The discussion.
someone would be here.
So, yeah, I would move that we table further discussion on this until the finance planning team is able to come to some sort of reasonable conclusion that all parties can agree to.
We'll do so. Next item on our agenda is the discuss potential sale of town-owned land. Mr. Belkins.
Board members, from the last meeting, you considered 5 separate parcels. If you'd refer to the second purple sheet, these are properties that residents had made an inquiry over. And the board had asked me to report back after meeting with the building inspector relative to the status of these properties. And the addresses were 4 Juniper Road. We see no reason why that property can't be offered for sale if that's what the board's intention is. The second is 3 Phyllis Terrace. The board had asked about where the location of the home was and whether the person that was interested in acquiring the property, in fact, had a home on the adjacent parcel. And in fact, they do have a home on the adjacent parcel number 20. The third property was 22 Oakhurst Terrace. The recommendation of administration is not to sell the property. The layout of Oakhurst Terrace in that location does not allow for the parcel to be sold. The roadway actually goes right through the middle of it. So what is shown on paper, the layout of Oakhurst Terrace would actually traverse through a wetland, and on it, as it exists on the ground, that's not correct. So we would not want to sell that piece of property because it could prohibit access to other parcels which are nearby.
Yeah, on the map, the road shows straight, and
Yep.
it actually curves up into the property.
35A Cedar Street, the recommendation would be not to sell the property. The reason for it, the board had asked me to report on the ownership of some adjacent parcels, but it's our understanding that this parcel comprises part of the turnaround that exists in that area and should not be sold. And then the last piece is 0 Cedar Street, and although there is no note in here, you'll note that the CPC planner had reported back that the intent would be that this would be combined with an adjacent lot and potentially could result in a buildable lot being created. So it could potentially be used for that purposes if the board decides it wishes to sell it. That being said, there's no legitimate reason as to why we couldn't sell it if that's your decision.
We already talked about having restrictions.
Right. And you have a right to establish reasonable restrictions on the property.
Oh, what do you mean by reasonable?
Well, that's the words the council uses. And in the past, what the board has done as a result of the public hearing, you receive a menu of a number of different restrictions that you can put on a parcel. So after the hearing, if you decide you want to sell it, we'll hold a hearing, we'll give you those restrictions, such as not being able to be used for the purposes of construction of a new lot, et cetera, et cetera.
The only thing I ask in relation to 3710 0 Cedar Street, the notes that we have on 3710, odd-shaped strip, which says, sell to abutters if possible, serves no purpose, I can see. So I don't know, where's the notation in relation to, let's see, that it may potentially allow for it to become a buildable lot?
That came in at about 3:30 today
Yeah, it came in an email.
from the CPC administrator.
And then, is that because this other lot, this 3-acre lot could be subdivided?
Yeah, she sent it at 3:48,
Okay.
and she said, just FYI, the existing owners of map 37 lot just came in my office to inquire about that piece of property. If purchased, they plan on merging it with their lot and build a cul-de-sac to create 2 lots.
Okay, that would be the 3-acre parcel. But what I don't understand, I guess, is what precludes them from doing that anyway, because it doesn't create any more frontage on an accepted way. They have 50-foot of frontage right now. It would appear to me that they could probably pork chop that lot anyway.
You can answer that question.
Jim, which one we talking about? 0 Cedar Street?
On 0 Cedar Street?
Yep. 0 Cedar Street,
It's a little pizza slice.
Yeah,
10,000 square feet.
what she was saying was that if the owners of parcel 5 were to purchase it, they would have enough to create 2 40,000 square foot lots. But they would have to apply to community planning to then extend that turnaround to create 160 feet of frontage on each lot. So they would come in and they would create the circle,
So that's parcel 5.
parcel 5.
Are they in common ownership with the adjacent parcel, that map 4102 and 103, do you know?
I believe that parcel comes off of Mentis Farm.
Yeah, one of them, 4102 is,
4102, okay.
4102 is 7 Mentis Farm.
Okay,
And 103 is 8 Mentis Farm.
so Jim, they've got 1.86 acres right now. This parcel 5.